Hi, I'm Annie, one half of Green Rooms Market, and I'm so excited to be joined by Isabelle Palmer. She's talking to us today all about small space planting, which is your area of expertise, isn't it, Isabelle? She's written a brilliant book called Modern Container Gardening, which we'll talk about a bit more later on. But hi, Isabelle, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Annie. Thanks for having me.
It's lovely to have you here. I'm really excited to hear all about your area of expertise. I think lots more people are kind of, with the lockdown, been making use of their generally small spaces outside. So it'd be great to get some of your tips, what's worked for you, and a little bit about styling as well, which would be really nice. So how you kind of style your containers, as well as creating a kind of outdoor room, which lots of people are doing at the moment.
Brilliant.
So yeah, I thought maybe you could, it looks like you've got a really beautiful space outside. If you could tell us a little bit about kind of your location, and also how you got your inspiration and how your planting space has evolved over time.
Okay, right. So I'll quickly show you my space here. Now, this is something that, I've had to kind of renovate slightly. This is a really good example of how you can update your space, is just by using some paint. And this is actually the paint colour that I've got in our living room. So it just kind of really extends that space and makes it bigger. And then I have these lovely big terracotta pots, which I've painted as well. There's a really fantastic kind of lime wash paint called Bowick paint, which is super brilliant for like terracotta pots, and it completely transforms them. And this, I'm actually on Richmond Green here, so we've got this lovely vista, but this is such a lovely place to kind of sit out and enjoy the sunshine. And I think what I really wanted to do, got this kind of large pittosporum here, is have somewhere that I could plant up and, you know, really not have to kind of do too much work. It's very, very sunny, and I planted it up probably last summer, and what I kind of tend to do is have a couple of plants that I can kind of intersperse that are seasonal in, you know, and flowering, so that I don't have to replant the whole window box all the time. And that's what you really want. You want something that's going to work all year long. So for instance, I've got skimmia in there, which is an evergreen plant. And I've also got some tiny little hydrangeas, which they're just like single stem. They're a little bit bigger now. Fleabane, which is a lovely kind of trailing daisy plant. And so I have just changed a couple of the plants. I had some primroses in last winter to early spring, and I've just changed those with some cosmos that I've grown from seed, and also some little mini dahlias. So there's also some snapdragons, which are a brilliant plant for container gardening, because they can last up to kind of, you know, a year, or I've had these, you know, for a year and a half now. So yeah, I think what I really like to do is make the space an extension of my, you know, whatever room it's kind of growing off. And to do that, I use colour schemes and, you know, objects that I've got as a basis to kind of design, you know, that space. So I've also got an outdoor rug there. So and, you know, we've got our seating. So you want to have something that's useful, that you can make the most of, and that's going to give you that sense of like a lush green oasis, even though it's super, you know, tiny. So for instance, using like the biggest container you can is a really good way, not only to lessen the amount of frequency that you have to water it, but it really creates a kind of statement and impact, rather than having lots of millions of little you know, pots around. Also, kind of the materials, you make sure that they're very sympathetic towards each other, and they're really a reflection of your style. So there's so many things out there. When I started 10 years ago, it was very kind of basic, and, you know, the plastic green containers or terracotta, and there wasn't anything that was kind of modern, which is really why I started the company. So I looked to kind of Europe, which they're so much more on, you know, forward focused on small spaces, because that's how they live over there. You know, there's so many more apartments. So yeah, so I think what you really want to do is, you know, have that kind of cohesion, and also, you know, make it useful. Do you want somewhere to sit and read, or to sunbathe, or you know, do you want to have somewhere to eat outside in the, you know, in the evenings, or yeah, and also, do you want to screen something off? You know, you've got to think about the practicalities of what you want from that space, and that's really kind of like a starting point, I think.
That's, yeah, really good tips there. So in terms of someone who has, say, just a windowsill, what would be your kind of, you mentioned, I was going to say, what was your kind of real suggested tips for just a window box? You mentioned kind of having something evergreen as well as other bits that then you kind of change up throughout the year. Have you got any kind of...
Yeah, so again, I mean, there's two ways I look at it. If you've got something that's at the front of the house and you want to kind of make like curb appeal and make it look very you know, attractive, and you just want, then I would probably use a you know, an evergreen basis, and then use some kind of seasonal flowering that, you know, gave you some color. But if you've got like a, you know, a window, just one window box, and you want it to kind of look like a little mini garden, that's where, you know, I think that the whole thing about having something differing heights, differing colors, and, you know, things trailing, so that you've got that kind of you know, garden scheme, I suppose. You know, you're using the elements that you would have in a garden, having like borders, taller plants, and, you know, colors that you like, and whittling it down into a smaller, you know, version of it. So yeah, I think it's really important to have that evergreen basis there. Otherwise, you know, you're just constantly, you know, if you're just using annuals, then you're got to completely rechange them at each season. So it's nice to have that, and also the fact that you're always going to have something green there.
So are there any particular plants that are really easy to care for, and maybe some that are harder to care for, so people know kind of what to avoid or what works best for them?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned before, things like skimmia, heucheras, you know, I would say I wouldn't really use box. One, there's like this caterpillar, box caterpillar that destroys them here in London. But also, I think, you know, it's a very formal looking plant, which is great if you're, you know, you want that kind of formal look. But I think if you want something a bit more romantic and, you know, painterly, then it's nicer to use things that are not so symmetrical. I love hydrangeas, and I think they're really easy to grow. They do take a little bit more watering, but they're a really hardy plant, and they give you such, I think you really want the plants to work for you, so lots of bloom time. Things like cosmos is great as well. Snapdragons, as I mentioned, lavender. It's nice to have scented plants as well. It really kind of increases and invokes that space that you've got. Yeah, I think, you know, things like pansies and violas are the basic kind of, you know, colour that you have are really good as well if you mix it up. The fleabane that I mentioned as well. What else? Ferns are really great as well, and things like having a succulent window box. I've got one at the front, and as long as you kind of make sure that it's you know, you can bring it in the winter, or that it's protected, it should go out, you know, throughout the whole year, and that's such a really striking, because of all the forms and the shapes. It's a really pretty combination.
So you'd do a succulent one for somewhere sunnier, I presume.
Yes.
On a really flat place. And then something like, because I was going to ask you about people that have shadier windowsills, so then something like ferns and heuchera would be good.
Yeah, and ivy's really great. You know, you've got that lovely kind of trailing. Things like, oh gosh, I've forgotten the name now. Hostas are really pretty and good in shade. And like geraniums, they're very good in kind of shade and sunnier aspects. Yeah, and you know, there's lots of things. You I said before, you've got to really look at what your space is, and that's where you start from, basically, I think.
Yeah, taking into consideration how much sun it gets and what that plant needs. Now, you mentioned hostas, so I know they're one that slugs love. Maybe they're not so much a problem if you're higher up, if it's a higher up window box.
Unfortunately not. The problem about, everyone thinks that about container gardening, and when you're on a balcony or roof terrace, unfortunately quite a lot of the plants that you buy have the small slugs or snails actually already in the pot because they've been outside. So I mean, I always I'm very vigilant when I'm planting them up and to look, but unfortunately it doesn't really help. But there's a really good product called slug nematodes, which you dissolve in water, which is an organic kind of pest control, and it's safe for children. And my father used it constantly. I haven't done it yet, but I know that it's really successful. So that's a way to kind of combat.
Yeah, that's a good tip. And squirrels is another one that I've definitely planted up bulbs in containers before in London, and then just gone out to find just a little hole.
Yeah.
Bulbs. And I think it's squirrels. I presume it has been squirrels.
Yeah. I had quite a few this year as well, earlier this spring. I think there's a couple of ways that you can, because we've got a couple of containers in the back and they just, tore the whole thing up, is to put large pebbles on any of the bare soil. And also is to, you can kind of use like really pointy sticks so that, they can't literally go in and rifle around.
Sorry, my daughter's just run into the room. I'm just sorry.
It's all right. I know the feeling well.
Yeah. She's been in the paddling pool, so she doesn't have that many clothes on at the moment. It's also keen to get her out. Sorry about that. Sorry, squirrels, please. Yes,
so you are using large pebbles is really good.
Yeah.
It's also good for like a decorative look. But I know my neighbour, she uses there's a very pointy kind of twig, pyracantha plant, which she plants within it so that they can't get in there. But yeah, I mean, it is inevitably they are going to do some damage, I'm sure, but I think you're just going to have to protect them with that.
Yeah.
But I do know that once we put those large pebbles in, they couldn't get them up. So I think would be my tip to stop that.
That's a really good idea. So watering, I guess, is something that with containers is, you have to water quite a lot more than in a garden. How often?
Yeah. I think that's, over the years, I would say that's pretty much the number one reason why any of my clients or people I've spoken to or friends have not had success, with container gardening or, for instance, even just house plants. And it's literally the key to, everything, is to water and make sure that soil's consistently moist. So yeah, I would say in the summer months, even if you've got a north facing garden, that you do need to water every day, and you can do that with a hose or a watering can, or put in a irrigation system. There's some really easy ones that you can buy to install, even on roof terraces and window boxes. We do quite a lot for our clients. So obviously if you've got an outdoor water supply. But yeah, I think that is really the key to all of this, is that you need to water it, and the feeding as well. Not so integral, to do it every single week, but quite a lot of these composts have at least 6 months worth of feed within them anyway. And then you don't need to re-top. You can top dress every year instead of completely replanting up, which is just taking the top layer off and then adding fresh compost on. And that will, elongate the time the plant's in the container.
Would you do that as well as feeding then within the?
Yeah, I do that with all of my containers every year. that even though you can pretty much grow anything in a container, it is a stressful environment for a plant, as more than than being in a ground. So you need to kind of give them as much chance to be healthy and grow, and also that it will be happy in that pot as well.
Brilliant. All right, so we touched a little bit on kind of styling. Is there anything else any other tips you wanted to share with styling an outdoor space? I've seen lots of amazing outdoor rooms now on Instagram. But yeah, if there's anything else you wanted to share on that.
Yeah, I think really, I always treat that space as a room. So, if you've got like a bedroom, you obviously need a bed and a, side table, and you just need to kind of translate that into, what you're going to be doing and what you want to be doing in that space. And as I said, using decorative elements from the room that it's leading off or whatever to kind of open up that space, using materials that are gonna not jar against each other, putting things like rugs, cushions, lighting really makes such a difference, and gives you that opportunity to use it in the evening as well. And things like mirrors are great for making the space look bigger. Hanging plants as well, that if you haven't got much floor space, is a really good way of increasing that. And having making it as lush and as kind of enclosed and as you possibly can. So you can grow nice trees in there, and it really kind of adds to the atmosphere.
Yeah, brilliant. There's some really good tips there. I guess now lighting and stuff like that could be fairly inexpensive to buy. It's not something I've actually looked into at all.
Yeah, and you've got quite a lot of solar panel power lighting out there. Really nice styled one, not some of the ones that look a bit rubbish. And also there's some really great products of battery operated and LED lights and lamps, really lovely statement ones that you can use as well, which you don't have to put a whole lighting rig in there.
Yeah, great ideas. Lovely, thanks so much for giving us loads of tips. So I wanted to touch a little bit about your book, Modern Container Gardening, and just so if you can explain to people exactly what the book involves, what people can expect, and where they can get it.
Oh, okay, well, I've actually got one here. Yeah, so this book is, it's really a book that I wished I'd had when I started out. It really kind of gives you the basics on how to start gardening, explaining, even how to read a plant label, things that, people sometimes, are scared to ask because they think it's too a silly question. But, all the things that I was bewildered with when I started. And also, I really wanted it to make it a useful book in terms of the projects. I haven't spent thousands of pounds on pots. There's so many DIY tips on how to kind of transform things relatively cheaply, using paint, as I mentioned, with the pots, and spray paint for containers, and just really stylish, contemporary, modern planters that you can mix and match and add into your space. I think there's something for everyone, even if you're not a novice and got lots of gardening expertise. I think it's quite an inspirational book, and yeah, I'm really proud of it. And yeah, I think it's a good one.
You should be. Yeah, everyone should have a copy. It's beautiful as well as really informative, which is ideal, I think, in a book. Right, so thanks so much, Isabelle. It's been so nice to talk to you. You shared so much useful information. Just to say that we've got one other video with you, which is also going to be available on our IGTV. And we're talking in that one about growing food, things that you can eat, herbs, and things that you can grow from your own food waste as well. So thanks so much for that. And enjoy being outside while you can in this nice weather.
I know, I might go in the paddling pool as well.
I've been sitting
All right then, Ellie, thanks so much for having me. Lovely to chat to you. Take care. Bye-bye.